Well, well, if it isn't Nigel Farage doing what Nigel Farage does best, pointing at migration statistics like a dramatically surprised person who's just discovered that water is wet. The man who's made an entire political career out of being professionally concerned about people crossing borders has just delivered another absolute bang of a statement that's got Westminster buzzing like a wasp at a summer barbecue. Picture this. You're scrolling through social media, probably watching videos of people trying to parallel park badly, when suddenly BAM, Farage drops a political bomb that's got more explosive potential than a firework in a tinderbox. He's just blasted weak Sir Keir Starmer over 50,000 migrants crossing the channel on small boats under Labour, and trust me, the way he's delivered this news, you'd think he'd personally counted every single dinghy that's made the journey. But before we dive headfirst into this political tsunami, let's paint a picture of what 50,000 people actually looks like. That's roughly the population of Canterbury, or if you prefer football analogies, it's enough people to fill Wembley Stadium and still have about 10,000 left over for a decent afterparty. And according to Farage, they've all made their way across the channel since Starmer moved into number 10, which, let's be honest, is either remarkably coincidental timing or the most dramatic welcome party in British political history. Now, here's where things get absolutely delicious from a political drama perspective. This milestone figure of 50,000 is expected to be confirmed when official figures are released, and Farage, never one to miss a good photo opportunity with statistics, took to X with the subtlety of a brick through a window. His post read, "As I predicted 5 years ago, unless we deport illegal migrants, the invasion will be huge. 50,000 since our weak Prime Minister took office, and there's no sign of it stopping." The word invasion, there's doing more heavy lifting than a bodybuilder at the Olympics. Farage has essentially turned immigration statistics into the political equivalent of a disaster movie trailer, complete with dramatic language that would make even the most seasoned screenwriter blush. It's like he's narrating the opening of an action film where the protagonist is a statistical spreadsheet and the villain is, well, apparently anyone in a small boat with a dream of reaching Dover. But let's talk numbers, shall we? Because numbers don't lie, even when politicians are doing their best impression of creative mathematicians. This 50,000 figure has been reached in just 401 days since Sir Keir entered Downing Street. Now, for comparison, and this is where it gets spicier than a vindaloo, it took 603 days under Rishi Sunak to reach similar numbers. That's like comparing how quickly two different drivers get stuck in the same traffic jam. Technically one might be faster, but they are both still sitting in the same mess. The timing here is absolutely crucial, and not just because politicians love a good gotcha moment. We're talking about 50,000 people in 401 days under Labour versus whatever equivalent period under the Conservatives. It's the kind of statistical comparison that makes for brilliant political ammunition, regardless of the complex factors that might actually influence migration patterns. You know, minor details like global conflicts, economic conditions, weather patterns, and the general state of international chaos that seems to define our current era. Labour, bless their hearts, came into power with a pledge to smash the gangs, which sound like something out of a 1920s gangster film where politicians wear fedoras and speak in dramatic whispers. Their approach was supposed to tackle the root cause of the small boats crisis, focusing on disrupting the criminal networks rather than the destination-based deterrence the Conservatives had been attempting. And speaking of conservative deterrence, let's talk about the elephant that's no longer in the room, the Rwanda deportation scheme. Starmer scrapped his plan faster than you can say judicial review, making it one of his first acts in office. The Rwanda scheme had been about as successful as a chocolate teapot, beset by legal challenges that made getting through a particularly bureaucratic airport security queue look like a quick trip to the corner shop. The irony here is absolutely magnificent. The Conservative scheme managed to send exactly 0 people to Rwanda involuntarily, but somehow became a political football that everyone kicked around Westminster for months. It was a policy equivalent of a very expensive paperweight, looked important, cost a fortune, but ultimately didn't move anything anywhere. But here's where the political chess game gets really interesting, and by interesting I mean potentially explosive for Labour's reputation. Education Minister Baroness Jackie Smith, a former Home Secretary who presumably knows a thing or two about the complexities of migration policy, admitted on BBC Breakfast that 50,000 is an unacceptable number of people. That's not exactly the ringing endorsement of government policy you'd want to hear from your own cabinet members. Smith's response was a political equivalent of saying, "Yes, The house is on fire, but it was already smoldering when we moved in. She blamed the previous Conservative government for allowing gangs to become entrenched, stating, "It sort of demonstrates a way over the last 6 or 7 years that the criminal gangs have got an absolute foothold in the tragic trafficking of people across the channel." It's fascinating how quickly we've moved from Labour's confident pre-election promises of smashing the gangs to admitting that actually, these gangs have had years to establish themselves and might be a bit more difficult to smash than initially anticipated. It's like discovering that the spider you thought you could easily remove from your bathroom has actually been building an entire web empire while you weren't looking. The political implications here are staggering when you really think about it. Farage, the man who's made immigration his political bread and butter, has just been handed what might be the perfect stick with which to beat the current government. He's been saying for years that unless you physically remove people who arrive illegally, the numbers will continue to grow. And now, whether through coincidence, policy failure, or the complex realities of global migration, he's got statistics that seem to back up his predictions. This isn't just about numbers on a spreadsheet. It's about political credibility, campaign promises, and the age-old question of whether anyone in Westminster actually knows how to solve complex international problems, or if they're all just really good at pointing out when the other side failed to solve them. What makes the situation even more politically volatile is the context. We're not just talking about migration statistics in isolation. We're discussing them at a time when public services are stretched, housing costs are through the roof, and many people are feeling the economic pressure of daily life. When politicians start throwing around figures like 50,000 in 401 days, it resonates with voters who are already feeling squeezed by various pressures. Farage's use of the word invasion is particularly clever politically, even if it's inflammatory linguistically. It transforms what could be seen as a humanitarian crisis into a national security issue, shifting the emotional framing from sympathy to fear. It's the difference between seeing desperate people seeking safety and viewing arrivals as a threat to be repelled. Both perspectives might be valid in different contexts, but they lead to very different policy conclusions. The weak Prime Minister jab is classic Farage, personal, pointed, and designed to stick in people's minds. It's not just criticizing policy. It's attacking character, suggesting that Starmer lacks the strength or will to handle what Farage frames as a crisis. Whether this characterization is fair or accurate is less important politically than whether it resonates with voters who are looking for leadership on difficult issues. Labour's position is becoming increasingly precarious here. They inherited a situation that was already challenging, scrapped a policy that wasn't working anyway, implemented their own approach focused on tackling criminal gangs, and yet the numbers have continued to rise. It's like being a manager of a football team that was already losing, changing the tactics, but still conceding goals. Eventually, people start questioning whether you know what you're doing. The international context makes this even more complex. We're living through a period of global instability, with conflicts and crises in multiple regions that are displacing millions of people worldwide. The UK's small boat arrivals are part of a much larger pattern of human movement that no single government policy can completely control. But try explaining that nuance when political opponents are armed with simple, stark statistics. What's particularly striking about this whole situation is how it reveals the limitations of political promises when they meet the reality of global issues. Labour promises smash the gangs. The Conservatives promise Rwanda will be a deterrent, and Farage promises that deportations would solve everything. Meanwhile, people continue to risk their lives in small boat crossing one of the world's busiest shipping lanes. The human element in all this political point scoring is both tragic and easy to lose sight of amid the statistics and sound bites. We're talking about 50,000 individual people who were desperate enough to risk everything for the chance of a different life. Whether you view their arrivals as a crisis to be managed, a humanitarian issue to be addressed, or an invasion to be repelled probably depends largely on your political perspective and personal circumstances. As we watch this political drama unfold over the coming days and weeks, the key question isn't just whether Farage's criticism will damage Labour's reputation. It's whether any of our political leaders actually have workable solutions to what appears to be an increasingly intractable problem. Because pointing out problems is much easier than solving them, and governing is much harder than campaigning. Thanks for watching UK Pancakes, where we serve up political drama hotter than the Channel crossing debate. Don't forget to subscribe because, trust me, this migration story is far from over.